Welcome to the Spoiler Alert podcast. And today is Independence Day. It's the 4th of July. Happy America Day, America. A very fitting 4th of July film would be Born on the 4th of July, which is Oliver Stone's 1989 film starring Tom Cruise. To me, it's always been Tom Cruise's second best performance, just to Magnolia.
Oh yeah,
this is definitely the biggest performance that I think is great by him for me.
Yeah.
But I would say that he's a little better in Magnolia, but that's a supporting role. So
right. No, he's amazing in that. I mean, he's just a great actor, but I mean, he might be a bit, whatever. But well, it's Hollywood, so there'd be no movies left to watch if you dismissed an actor just because they're a little crazy. But,
I mean, they're all crazy, like for sure, man. But just some backstory on Born on the 4th of July is that it is a biopic about this real life soldier named Ron Kovic, who was injured in the Vietnam War, came home, didn't feel like the war was worth it after a certain amount of time, didn't feel like veterans were getting the correct support from the government, from just kind of like the environment back home. Watching some special features, some of the more interesting things that I read or listened to about it was that Oliver Stone and Ron Kovic had tried to make the movie back in 1978, and this was before Oliver Stone really became much of a director. He was still kind of writing scripts, like he wrote Midnight Express around this time.
Really good.
But the financing dropped out, like I believe just a couple days before shooting, so they couldn't make Born on the 4th of July back in 78. So what Oliver Stone said, and this is what Ron Kovic said, so it's I think it's probably true, is Oliver Stone made a promise to Ron Kovic that if I make it through as a director and I can direct, things that I want to make, I'll come back for you and we'll make it and we'll do it right. So he kept that promise. And this movie is coming right off of Oliver Stone's huge success in Platoon that was, very popular among critical audiences and everyday audiences as well.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite movies. What do you think about Platoon real quick?
Oh, just the same. I mean, I don't know how to quickly summarize. I mean, I just think one of absolutely the greatest movies ever made and definitely one of my absolute favorites. So,
I mean, Platoon might be the most realistic Vietnam War movie, possibly.
Yeah, it feels like it.
But at the same time, like Apocalypse Now still might be the most artistic and kind of like digs down into like more like the meaning of things rather than the what's happening.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of like Sophie's Choice, but I would probably have to say Apocalypse Now is my preferred. But just that's again
barely.
Yeah, so. I mean, in a way, I guess this feels like the most realistic Vietnam film, even though we're not in Vietnam very long. But when you are there, you're just like, I remember thinking, like I want to get the hell out of here, because it's so bloody depressing. And then you end up in the hospital, and that's no relief at all. And you're like, I want to get the hell out of here. And then he ends up at home, and after a while, you're like, well, fuck, this sucks too. And like there's just nowhere for me to go.
And then he goes to Mexico, and
right.
that has a shelf life too.
Yeah, so the whole time you just want to get out of there. And then, I think he has that realization towards the very end where it's like, where the hell am I going to go? What am I going to do?
The film actually begins like with like kind of just like 1950s Americana in a sizzle reel. Like it's kids playing War in the Forest. There's a parade. Actually, one of the wounded soldiers in the parade is a cameo of Ron Kovic.
Oh.
The real life dude was in that parade as a cameo as like one of the older like World War II soldiers. Or
Not the one who's having the flashes or whatever when the was that
same
him?
same
Oh,
one.
okay. All right.
Yep, that's like a nice little wink back to him.
Yeah.
That's a that's also like a cameo that doesn't really like show itself off or anything, you know what I mean?
No, I mean it's
uh,
critical to the story. I mean, because there's the whole full circle thing. But yeah, I never
mhm.
knew it was him. I mean, so it worked. It wasn't just a pointless cameo, you know. Like
Yeah,
I like that it's actually integrated then, you know.
yeah, and then there's fireworks because it's, you know, the 4th of July, and his birthday is on the 4th of July, and that's where he gets his first kiss, and they play some baseball. Like it is truly just 50s Americana in like a espresso shot. Like
And that's the thing. I was watching it, and I was like, you know, it could like almost not work, you know, like it could be over the top, but it does work. You do get swept up in it. I mean, it's and you know, because I think a lot of directors are almost sort of dismissive of that, and so it kind of doesn't work, you know, when you're like, oh, this is all bullshit from the start. It's like, well, no, I mean, it really does treat it like this is his life. And then I'm getting ahead a bit, but when he does come back, nothing's really changed. It's changed for him, but everybody's still living in that little like wonderland, you know, and it's
that like
uh,
Truman Show world. Like
yeah, right, you know, and then he brings the reality back with him eventually, and you know, I mean, but it could have been mishandled, but I think it works, you know.
I think two of the things that make that scene work, so this sequence work so well, is like the music, which is John Williams. John Williams is known for like mainly Spielberg and Star Wars movies, but he has been with Oliver Stone on a number of films. He I know for a fact he did Born on the 4th of July, and he did JFK, and both of those scores are amazing because I mean he just shits out
Well,
beauty.
yes,
Like,
anything he bloody does. I mean,
like it doesn't matter. Like it's all gonna be original. My favorite cinematog like director of photography in like the modern, you know, post 1950s era, Robert Richardson.
I really
Who
was impressed with the work here, but I didn't know who did it. I mean,
well, okay, so Robert Richardson, he's done like every Tarantino movie since
oh,
Kill Bill.
okay.
He's done like every Scorsese movie since Aviator, the
Wow.
Aviator, and then he's done all three of the major Oliver Stone films, so Platoon,
Platoon and
Bourne,
yeah.
JFK. The dude is just all over the place, and he's for me like one of the best portrayers of like just vibrant colors, and he works with saturation well. And but in this movie there's a lot of desaturation, there's a lot of like kind of, especially in this opening sequence, there's like kind of a chrome to it, to the look, you know what I mean, where everyone kind of seems like they're like shown through like a silver lens or something like that,
Oh,
where it's not quite black and white, but it's not full color either.
oh, I get what yeah. I mean, just the camera work and movement, you know, in the movie. So that always stuck out to me. So yeah, so you're saying this dude's just great. I mean, he had his
Yeah,
hands on.
and I don't know, he's just in on a lot of stuff. I think he did Salvador with Oliver Stone as well. It just gives it like this chromy 1950s,
Mhm.
1960s kind of Norman Rockwell kind of feeling to it. I just love when like they're able to capture, when people are able to kind of capture that kind of chrome look. In this montage, the family's sitting around the TV watching Kennedy getting sworn in, and his mother turns to him and says, "I was having a dream that last night that you were in front of a crowd just like Mr. Kennedy, and you were saying great things."
Yeah.
And that comes into play later, kind of puts a great bow on the film.
You know, it doesn't really seem that artificial because I mean, for one thing, a mother always thinks that their kid is, you know, really
Mm-hmm.
special and everything. And you know, if she's watching these speeches on TV, you could see where that would connect up, and she'd have a dream like that. So it doesn't seem like a lie, you know. Um,
Yeah.
like one of those premonitions, because a lot of movies will do that where it's like, they set that up and it's really, I don't know how to put awkward or unbelievable, that like the premonition thing, but that just felt like something a mother might actually say or whatever. It just didn't feel unbelievable to me,
Right.
So
And just going in as well, Oliver Stone is very well known for his like political beliefs and how like he like inserts his political beliefs into his movies to at least varying degrees in each one. This one, I think, even if you would disagree with Oliver Stone politically, is probably the more accessible one for both sides, because if you're like pro Vietnam War, if you're anti Vietnam War, most people aren't like fuck the soldiers, right?
yeah,
Like
it
like
does take a really complicated perspective. I mean, because it's, well, I guess that's really what the whole movie kind of boils down to, because it is really complicated. I mean, he starts off on one side, ends up on the other. I mean, it's
and
very confrontational, but not like it's also, I guess it's honest. So it feels honest anyway. So I think that's what saves it from being, well, like I
preach.
said, it's confrontational, but not like offensively. So not,
I think what you said about honesty is like important because it is a biopic, right?
right.
And Ron Kovic was like co-wrote the thing, was on Oliver Stone's side the whole way. So if there's any politics in this movie that may bother you, just know like that is the politics of this specific character in real life.
Right. I mean,
So
which is
like it's
pretty cool.
not just Oliver Stone running an agenda. It's it's
Right. It's all coming out of that character who, yeah, I mean, so I that's the other thing that, I mean, yeah, I guess falls under the honesty thing. Like that's who he was, and so it doesn't, and obviously, well, yeah, like he co-wrote it. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's trying to artificially put him in any camps, like they do that sometimes with biopics and build a story around a guy. Like this is the guy, so I
mhm.
mean,
He's on a side because like he feels strong about it, or you know what I mean. It's not because it's not like, oh, we're draping a side over him
right.
and skewing his beliefs, you know what I mean.
Right. You get why he believes, I mean, what kind of person he is and why he believes what he, at the start of the film. And then, but I thought that was kind of an interesting thing that the character could go for, like, be the same person yet completely opposite, once that transformation happens. He's still.
And in the interview I saw with Ron Kovic and Bryant Gumbel, Kovic said that, because Tom Cruise, I don't know what his politics are now, but at the time was definitely more right wing than Kovic or Oliver Stone. But Tom Cruise wanted to do it because it's a good story about, a soldier, and he doesn't exactly believe in everything that Tom Cruise would believe in, but he respects it. But Tom Cruise said that they're actually like somewhat alike, because Tom Cruise explains about how he's so obsessive over movies, where like if he's in a Mission Impossible movie, he's gonna fucking go no stunt men, just crazy like
Yeah,
with it,
right.
and
Yeah.
just obsessive with it.
There's
And
some pretty fucking awesome stunts, I've got to say. I mean, so.
yeah, and he explained how Kovic is also like one of those 100% or nothing guys, where when he was on, the traditional kind of small town nuclear family right wing side, he was aggressively that, like you said, he was love it or leave it. And when he had like reality hit him in the fucking face, he became
Not
very
very
much on the left
graceful about that
side,
either,
and was like, we should never gone into Vietnam and all that, you know what I mean? So he's a 100% or zero guy. And that fit well with Tom Cruise's personality.
Well, yes, I think he becomes that by the end of the film, but there's as would probably very much be the case. I mean, when you become completely disillusioned, well, he's completely lost for a very good chunk of that film. And, by the end, he finds something to fight for and whatever again, and that's what he needed. Because, I mean, without that, yeah, it just, I mean, because you get it. I mean, he's stuck in that situation. I mean, there's no, and now he doesn't even have any, pretty lies he can tell himself about it, because he's been stripped of all that. And it's like, I mean, that's the only thing I guess I wish we'd seen a little more at the very end of him actually kind of coming full circle, because it kind of ends right before he goes out to speak. Like, we're told he's going to say great things, but we don't ever actually get to hear a lot of those.
That's true. I think that might be.
I'm sure it was deliberate. I just don't know if it was the right decision, though.
That may have been the point where he got into like most people's consciousness, maybe that was like widely televised, and that's why people know it, and then we don't know it because we didn't watch it live on television.
Right. So showing everything before that moment that people might not know, I guess.
Possibly. But yeah, I see what you mean, where like we could have, not sure how climactic of a nature that speech would have been, but they could have maybe found some way to do it.
But it does feel like that's the arc. And so maybe a little more time in some way or shape should have been, because really it's just him speaking to that reporter, and then he's going up to make a speech, and then it just kind of ends. And I feel like after spending so much time just watching this dude go through absolute hell, I think maybe a little bit more of a payoff there, would have helped. But it's a nitpick. I'm not saying it's broken or anything. It just would have been nice if there's a little more time there. But again, I can't myself think of what that would look like. So I don't know.
Right. And then, so he's in wrestling. That's like another one of the things he does once he's like in high school. He's worried about losing a match, and his mother, this is when we get some of like his religious mother stuff, where she says, just do your best. That's what matters to God. And she really becomes like the religious figure that like kind of pounds that into him. And that backfires big time later on in the movie.
Yeah.
And then there's some Marine recruiters in their high school, like led by the actor Tom Berenger, who was in Platoon and was great in Platoon. This is just a short scene, but Willem Dafoe is also in this movie later on. Mm-hmm. So it's nice. It's kind of like a cool Oliver Stone sort of reunion thing.
Yeah. Playing a very different role. Here he's pretty fucking uncool and unchill.
Ron in like a McDonald's or in a local like shake shop or wherever they are, tells his friends, which includes Stephen Baldwin, by the way, tells his friends that he's enlisting in the war, and at the time he's doing this, it's actually like very early on, probably like 65 or 64. Mm-hmm. So it's very early on in the war, and they're like, hey, like, just, there's probably like why are you enlisting? Like, it's, we're like, most of us are just hoping we're not going to get drafted. Like, what's the deal? And he's like, don't you want to fight for your country? Don't you want to stop communism and all these, traditional American kind of propaganda, like thumping at the time.
You could see why at the same time he would believe that at that time, because we hadn't had Nam yet. We had World War II, and the 50s are, well, I mean, we're coming out of a depression. So, I mean, but we won a war, and now we're reinvigorated as a nation, and, and all that shit. So, I mean, there'd be no reason really for him to think anything else, I mean, but other than that, yeah, this is the right thing. It's a continuation on the success of, I mean, that America saw in the last war, probably.
And off of what you said, one of the things that Ron says is like, don't you want to be a part of something great? Don't you want to be a part of something bigger than yourself? And at the end of the day, I think that's his main motive, is he wants to be a part of something bigger than himself. And that thing changes throughout the movie slowly from one thing to another. He asks out Donna, his like childhood crush, to prom, but she's going with someone else. Instead of going to prom, he comes home, speaks with his father, who's watching TV, and his father's getting nervous about it. And then his father mentions in the line, like, the attitude of the homeland is going to be important. So that comes into play later. And then Ronnie is like, this is like the day before he ships out. So, or like maybe like the week. But he's praying in his bedroom for God to give him strength and reason and everything. And then he runs through the rain to dance with and kiss Donna before he has to ship out forever. And that's about like the last pure scene we get. And then
Yeah.
there's amazing cut right to the war. I that's like one of the most notable like things that sticks out of my head in this movie is like that cut.
Yeah. And the movie feels pretty segmented too. Like it jumps, like it's very clearly structured. So once you're out of Vietnam, you're very immediately in the hospital. And once you're out of the hospital, you're very immediately back home, and then in Mexico. Like it doesn't. It just structured very deliberately that way. So, but I suppose that makes sense because each of these are like chapters out of this guy's life. You know, I mean, so. A lot of kind of hard cuts and a lot of really stark contrast there, obviously, which is a great technique, obviously. I mean, just to set it, I know a lot of other war movies do exactly that, and those, the peace and quaintness of home life versus the hellish realities of war, but here it's done really effectively. And then I think the other thing that's unusual is that we return home within, the same movie, and nothing's actually changed, but everything's changed for this guy. So it's more unsettling that things are still all, whatever, sunny skies and everything for all these people,
Yeah, it's like how long has this illusion been going on kind of thing, But the scene that they cut to is them on a beach in 1967 in Vietnam. And at this point, he's talking to this new recruit. Ron Kovic explains that it's his second tour already. This recruit named Wilson. He's like, "Where are you from, Wilson?" He's like, "I'm from Georgia." And he's like, "I've never seen a Georgia kid get hurt in my time here." Just to calm his nerves, basically. His cruise's commander asks him if he sees rifles like perched out in the village.
And the way that shot is really well done, because you as the audience are like really trying to make it out. Like if you see and like I don't think, but he's like, yeah, totally, because it's clear that that's the answer his commander wants. You see him too, right? And don't you see them? He's like, oh yeah, so
yeah,
that's kind of, you as the audience are like, maybe, okay, I guess, so because they're silhouettes off in the distance and the camera's shaking, and it's hard to really tell. So you don't know if it's like they've got like I don't know, some kind of farming tool or what that they're running around with. You can't really tell.
Like we were saying, the camera is like in a POV and it's bobbing and there's confusion. You can't tell where anything is, and that's
they're really like silhouettes, so you don't know if what they're carrying is a rifle or just a fucking goddamn rake,
Yeah, or like a fucking broom. Yeah. So he's like, "All right, do you see the rifles?" And without having seen them, Kovic says, yeah. And he gives, and he starts like barking off orders to people, but he doesn't say like fire yet or anything. He's just like, "This is where we're focusing, blah, 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 blah." Like eyes over here, eyes over here, eyes over here. And then they start shooting. And then he's like, "Fuck, stop. Like, just stop."
Well, yeah, no, I mean, the gradual escalation of that. Yeah, because I mean, as the audience, I mean, it was kind of weird. You feel inclined to nod your head like, because the sergeant or whoever he is, who's in command above Kovic,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Do you see that?" And he's like really pressuring him. He's like, "Do you see it?" And you're like, yeah.
And it feels so much like when you have a job and you don't know, like, and you actually like miss what's being instructed, and you're like,
right.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah.
Right.
But then you fuck up like.
And you think that's harmless enough, but then everybody starts firing on the village because of your agreement, And like that's, you'd feel a lot of responsibility there, I mean, but at the time you wouldn't think anything of it. You know, it's
Right.
like you said, it's like a fucking McDonald's job. It's like, oh yeah, I totally know how to fry these patties. Oh yeah, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And then they go to like check out the area and they realize like they only killed civilians, like pretty much. Like they open up this hut. It's just carnage. There's women and children shot, dead,
that's
like babies left like motherless, like just carnage. And uh Cruz's character Kovic is the only one like that's like kind of got his, like, I can't even say he's got his shit together, but he's like doing something. He's trying to patch up a kid, and he's asking for help, and
it's
like
like a,
it's,
isn't it like a little girl with her leg blown off?
I think so, or like someone with like a big like gash in their stomach.
That's right. Yeah, that's a yeah, the little yeah, the little kid with like, you know, the his back blown out. You know, like I mean, you can, I think you can like see his spine, and like that's the thing in all these goddamn fucking movies. They never dare show, and that's why I love this one. Out of all the Vietnam or all the war movies, that like it's that's what stands out in my mind. Like that's the thing I watched as a kid and never left. Was like I know it's fake, but like it didn't feel, you know, when I watched it as a kid, like it didn't feel like, I mean, that's the stuff they never show.
Even how gruesome and stunning like Saving Private Ryan is like it doesn't
Yeah,
go
it's
into
not the next
like
thing because I mean, there's that little girl with their fucking leg off. You know, there's a little boy with his back blown out. I mean, they never
and
showed that.
it just show, and that it goes to show you how like women and children are not exempt from being victims in war. And it's just, you know, like it's important like that, like I feel like someone explains that or shows that in some way. I do just want to point out that like in Born on the 4th of July, the violence on these children, women
Yeah,
is
there's really
done
nothing else beyond that point in the movie. It's just that.
right.
It's yeah.
It is done with a level of like taste and kind of, I suppose, like dignity. Like maybe dignity is not the right word,
Well,
but like
I think the dignity comes from like the fact that it doesn't show any violence before that or after that. It really shows only that moment, and it's so horrifying and so
they're not getting their
yeah. I mean,
jollies off by like hurt by like showing like kids in pain. They're doing it because like it's
yeah,
truth.
yeah, no,
It's
yeah. It's
truth.
not exploitative. It's not like, yeah. I
It's
guess I get what
exploitative.
you're saying. It's not like lingering on that moment, like ooh, you know, like it just feels naturalistic. It's, I mean, there's I feel like each war movie I really try to look like at like what they try to contribute to the genre, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you know, like Jarhead is the idleness of war. You know, really, it's like the whole act of doing nothing, being trained to do something where you do nothing, and being trained to kill where you don't kill anybody. You know, how it drives you fucking crazy. Like, I really love Jarhead for that reason. The Full Metal Jacket, God, that first half of that fucking movie is a movie on its own. It's just fucking pitch perfect.
So they eventually are like gonna get ambushed now. So their sergeant is like, you guys gotta get the fuck out of here. Go, go, go. So they're running through the dunes, and Kovic has to stop and shoot and shoot and shoot. And then he looks over the dune and it's a silhouette, and he fires, and it's obviously a US soldier.
Well,
And
obvious isn't the right word. I mean,
oh,
you as
right.
the audience recognize that, oh, fuck.
But we
Right.
recognize because it's in slow motion.
But because he's so silhouetted against the sunset, it's because the emphasis put on that moment that you recognize he fucked up. But if there weren't for that dramatic emphasis, you might not.
You might make the same mistake he made
right
if you were in those shoes, is what.
Yeah, it's because it's slowed down. It's yeah.
And then another POV shot like crawls up right on it, and it's Wilson. It's the guy that he had just told, like, hey, calm down, kid, you'll be fine. And he's shot right in the neck, and he's like, he's done for. He dies pretty much right away. And then that night, Ron actually tries to confess to his like an even higher up. But that guy, this is like a really interesting part in the movie because like that guy is like, don't tell me that shit. Like, I need every man I can have. We don't need someone fucking court-martialed that has like experience like you do. Like, it's his second tour, so
Yeah.
he's a pretty well experienced soldier at this point. He's like, we don't need that shit. Don't give me that shit. Like, we need you out in the field. And so like he just completely like smothers the entire thing.
Yeah.
And that
He's like, I'll take your fucking head off. I think
like,
yeah.
yeah, he's like, I'll take your head off. And to the audience, we're kind of like, oh, we're kind of glad he gets away with it, but we're also like, but like the guilt that it gives him throughout the movie and the years after is almost worse than what ends up happening to him. Basically, the officer rejects Kovic's confession, and then we cut to a number of maybe a few weeks, a few months later, still in Vietnam, and he's like in this paddy field, I believe, of some type. His platoon gets fired on and just decimated. He gets shot in the ankle. His heel like is blown the fuck off, and he doesn't stay down. He gets up and is just like trying to be fucking like trying to be a fucking hero, and like he explains it later in the movie, like trying to be like John Wayne.
But that's what stood out to me as a kid was, you know, those zoom ins. He's like, fuck, it's Jeff, you fucking motherfucker. Like, I mean, it felt like a big moment, but then everything after that moment, it just is not
it's
worth
just so
it.
defeating. It's just so,
yeah, right. It's
like you said, I think you just said like not worth it. Like he you could be like as much of a badass as you want, but a grunt soldier on the other side could still ruin your life. Like you could be fucking Rambo, and then a fucking, you know, in real life, not movie world, like a grunt could just like cap you if like
what?
it's just not worth it. And then they go to the medical tent, and that's fucking chaos. The doctor is overwhelmed, and a priest gives him his last rites, and they cut away from that, I believe, directly to him in a rehab facility in the Bronx.
Yeah, I mean, that was the other thing. Like, I mean, when you see him shot through, you don't immediately see it, but a few scenes later, I mean, you see this gaping flesh wound, and that's how it would be. I mean,
because yeah, that's a good thing to bring up. He was shot like around here.
Yeah, but the
it would be like his
wound.
Right side. But the exit wound blew the fuck out of his back. So he is paralyzed.
And the movie doesn't draw any attention to that. It's just completely naturalistic. Like, it's a split-second scene where you see, like, holy shit. You see this big fucking flesh wound, you know, on the back. But it doesn't draw any attention to that. It's not, like, focusing in on it. You just see it for, like, a split second. You're like, fuck, he's dead. You know, but he's not. You know,
and I'm not sure like the science of like the through and throughs might be different.
The thing I know about is blast trauma, you know, and like, so people are crush trauma, you know, where people that should make it otherwise because of the blast, the shock waves, you know, it ruptures organs and whatever, and they die.
So he does end up surviving, and we cut directly to a Bronx veteran hospital, and we have like this like weird sort of like walk in, like we're following the nurses around, and they're putting in IVs, they're taking temperatures, there's rats all over the ground, and one of the patients is like I've been feeding them, and then the nurse is like, yeah, well, you better keep feeding them and then they won't bother you. We'll have nothing to worry about.
Right, yeah. It was really shit. So like everything I understand from that movie was not exaggeration.
So yeah, so veteran hospitals have like have historically been like sketchy. And he's still strapped into like this like his hometown mindset of like love it or leave it, because he's
Yeah.
watching the news and the civil rights movement is going on, and he's like, love it or leave it, they're burning the flag, yada yada yada, that kind of stuff. One of his caretakers is black and is explaining to him like, hey, just because you fought for your country and you're proud of your country doesn't mean like it's good for all of us. Like, some of us are fighting our own war here while y'all are fighting someone else's war overseas, which, like, you know, is a reoccurring thing where, like, you know, there's big criticism of America where we can, you know, maybe we should try to solve more of our own problems before we solve the world's problems. And we always seem to want to solve the world's problems more, even though, you know, for more or less nefarious reasons, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So that's like a big thing that's like like a seed being planted into his head. And he's starting to kind of walk on like his like crutches. He's doing really well, doing a lot of pull-ups, like really ambitious about it. And then he fucking cracks his femur. just and
Yeah.
and so that pretty much puts the kibosh on like any of him borderline walking even.
Which, yeah, it becomes a totally different thing after that. Like, he's just all about saving at least that leg, even if he can't walk.
Also, okay, so and then we learned that like he has some kind of pump through that leg to take out the bad blood, I believe.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not I've never been 100% sure how that pump works, but it looks like a fucking coffee maker. And when blood drips into it, I think that means it's broken.
You can tell the fear and tension he feels through the night. You know, he starts screaming, obviously, but, you know, I mean, but like, this thing is broken down again, it seems, you
That
know,
he'll
and he's just, I mean, yeah, I think minute by minute, hour by hour, you know, the tension he feels, you know,
that
just
like
to
he'll
hold on
lose
to
the
this
leg.
leg. Yeah.
Because he spent an extra 4 months in that shithole to save his leg. Because he
Right.
could have just cut it off and
Yeah.
been out in a week. Which, you know, just shows like, in a way, his like stubbornness, but like his also drive. And then after he screams, cuts back to his hometown. They're pulling in with the car. All the neighbors are there. We see that he was managed to save his leg, and he's seeing his family again. And one of his brothers is kind of gives him this awkward look where like he's kind of like looking him up and down, like, oh man, like what the fuck happened to you? And we later see that like that brother is like anti-war. So many of like his old friends are like anti-war too, but like he does not want to hear it from anyone that did not experience it.
The only thing I can really think of that I don't think would be too controversial to say is that anybody who fights a war, they fight it to preserve their own little slice of the world, you know, their own little slice of Americana, whatever, you know, they fight it to preserve their world. That's what he's fighting for. And so, and then when he talks to his friend who came back from the war, like the only other motherfucker who survived it, they're talking about how like nobody else fucking made it, right? You know, I mean, nobody, you know, and
one guy got fucking killed by a
killed by a
flying
fucking
tree.
tree. You know, yeah, you got killed by a fucking tree branch from an exploding shrapnel, and yeah, right, and so this slice of the world that he was fighting for got destroyed. I mean, there's nobody left, and then that little slice has no place for him in the grand scheme of things. Like it can't fit him into it, you know, because there's no room for the horror that he's experienced. So he's rejected by it. So it's kind of a rejection of everything he fought for. I think that's what the whole movie centers upon. I don't know how to put it, but like obviously throughout the whole film, there's this kind of idea: don't ask what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. I think it was kind of backwards. It's like, I mean, the government, it serves you. That's the point. It's supposed to be utilitarian or whatever you want to put. I mean, like, it has preserved that little world for everybody else who wasn't there. But I mean, obviously the idea is that the cost was too high. All his high school friends, everybody who ever went there other than him and this one other fucking guy, are dead.
And he's lost his own innocence too. So even if his friends did come back, like he would not be the same person.
Right.
And also his college buddy, the buddy that went off to college, is starting like a burger chain that's like, you know, like he's like, oh, it's a franchise. We have this and there and this and there. And it's all just kind of like become like commercialized. And like that's one thing that Oliver Stone explained is like a lot of stories that he had heard from Kovic, among others, doing the research for this film, is that like a lot of people like came back, and like that's right around the time that like McDonald's got big. That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's right around the time that like fast food got big and big corporations like
somewhere in like
that
the late
kind of
50s,
thing where
yeah.
like the death of the mom and pop shop really kind of started to get its footing. So like that's decimated just on its own. And then, like you said, literally his friends are dead. And you know, his girlfriend, I know she was in college, but like I think she also had a boyfriend. And like she's very anti-war too. But again, like he never can digest, like he has these anti-war feelings like buried within him, but they can't come out unless he talks to somebody that he can actually like that had experienced it. So that's why he really only talks with Timmy about it, because like
yeah, somebody who knows what it was like. But even the way he talks about it with his girlfriend, I mean, that's just kind of thing that's missing from modern movies, you know, where it's like he remembers her, he remembers what he feels. He's not going to say something, even though it's very clear that he's going to feel very opposed to, you know, kind of the rhetoric that she's espousing. But he just kind of goes along. It's just those fond memories that, you know, he has. And
you do see that a lot in like real life too, where
well, yeah, that's what I mean. That's why I love this movie, is because I mean, this in a way feels like the most realistic Vietnam movie, even though most of it doesn't take place in Vietnam. You know, it feels like the most realistic in the sense of like the aftermath, you know.
Yeah, and even when people talk about politics, like if someone is very passionate about politics, whether on one side or the other, you always kind of in your weird like own like ego mind think that like, okay, like to a certain degree this person's going to agree with me, so now's the time I can vent my political rage real quick over dinner, you know what I mean, for 5 minutes and talk anti-war or pro-war, whatever, and just kind of assume that the other person kind of agrees with me. And deep down, Tom Cruise's character, I think, does, or at least finds something in what she's saying, but he cannot articulate it yet. He cannot let that come to the surface yet.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's been so rejected up to that point that, like, I mean, he's just, I think he's going along with it almost solely for the sake of his previous love for her, you know, I mean, but obviously it's the movie graduates, I mean, past that point, he comes to believe it in his own right, but at the time, I think it's just, he's not going to be rude, you know, he's not going to say, oh, fuck that. Even though we do see that he's willing to do that elsewhere, you know, and throughout the film. But yeah, his love for her, he's willing to put aside whatever political differences, which I feel is really believable. You know,
Yeah,
this kind of thing. Like that's again another thing that I think is a subtlety that's missing from modern movies. There's no subtlety. There is no, you know, I mean, you can disagree with somebody and still you know, retain your own beliefs and whatever. I mean, I don't know, it just feels like it's been missing for the past 5, 6, 7 years.
and there's a nice like visual element at the end of that scene too, where she's walking up these steps into like a dormitory, And even just on a basis of like education, like she has the opportunity. Well, I suppose vets like get like college opportunities, but she has like the opportunity, like she's like probably like a junior in college at this point or something.
Yeah.
And it's just like an extra sour note that like with like those steps to success, like everyone that decided not to go to war or just, didn't go to war because, they weren't really bringing like women into war at the time, has a better like life trajectory because they're in college. Like they're just on a better trajectory where even if he wanted to just think about it selfishly financially, he made the dumb decision. Morally, I think he eventually decides that he made the wrong decision.
Again, I don't feel like I'm getting political. I feel like any goddamn war ever in the world, the common people fight it for the sake of continuing their little world. And so, that might, obviously there have been many movies made about the Viet Cong and what that little world looks like for them. But I feel like what no other Vietnam movie and really not a lot of war movies have really done, they'll show, it's pretty, it's peaceful and all that. But I feel like Oliver Stone's really making a point here where this pretty little slice of Americana is what he is fighting for, He just wants that world to continue. And the great irony is that he returns to that little world and there's no place for him.
Well, too, like there are people like you mentioned, there are people fighting for their own little worlds, like even within America. If you're black in Detroit, you're fighting for your world.
Oh, yeah, that's the other thing I wanted to see. Yeah, right. I mean, and you could see that as disrespectful because he doesn't relate to it. But I mean, again, that's
but
their
it's
little
totally
world.
But for them, like that's totally like what is important to like a black person living in Detroit,
right? At that
and like
time.
it's super understandable. Or if you're even like a Viet Cong or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
no, I think better than any other Vietnam film that this movie captures that is what I guess I'm trying to say. It's that central idea that that little slice of life that you want to keep alive, and that's what you're fighting for. It's not America, it's not a country, maybe it's not even a philosophy, it's just to keep your little world together, I'm not saying that glibly, because I feel kind of a great pressure and everything. I'm like, but everything I've ever read is kind of that idea that like I don't give a fuck. I love the guy next to me. He's my brother. I've known him for a few years, whatever, and I don't want him to die. And that's at the forefront of their mind. They don't give a fuck about nationality or anything, really.
And that's what makes him even more lost because he killed one of his brothers.
Right. Yeah, that's so, beautiful. Like, yeah, right.
It's even more fucked. Like, because his slice of home is gone.
But yeah, like he's even more lost than anybody else because he killed one of his brothers.
He can't in full conscience say, you know what? I fought for my brothers. You know what I mean? And that's how he reconciles with himself. He does not have that reconciliation. So, and a lot of this blows up in this like night argument when he gets drunk and his friends wheel him home, and his mother is like talking about how like you have to go to mass tomorrow and do confession or whatever because like God doesn't want you drunk, yada yada yada. And then he's like, I don't believe in him anymore. She's like, don't say that. He's like, and now this is when he kind of becomes like, there's no God, there's no country, it's all lies.
Right.
And then like he's getting loud, he's waking up the neighbors. He says fuck at one point. His mother's like, don't say that. And he's like, fuck you. And she fucking smacks him. And then he just keeps saying, it's like, fuck you, fuck you.
I think the culmination of that whole scene is, I'm sorry, you're sad, right? Because he's trying, it's fucked up. Like he's trying to force that sadness despite whatever religious barriers, whatever barriers at all that his mother's crafted. And
he needs to share like the sadness with somebody, basically, is I think what you're getting at, where like he needs someone else to feel it to like prove that his feelings are real.
Yeah.
And like, so that's like really the point of this venting. And at one point he says like, I can't use my penis anymore, and she's and then yeah, it's darkly humorous.
Yeah, there's the other
like,
part of the movie I remember.
like,
yeah,
especially like if you only like Google, like if you only YouTube like this part of the movie, it's kind of humorous. Where like she's like, don't say penis, and then it's Tom Cruise just yelling penis, penis,
big erect fucking penis. Yeah. So,
but it kind of ends on the note where it's like, God told us that we shall not kill women and children, and I killed women and children. She's like, you did not kill women and children.
I mean, he didn't directly, but he feels that guilt. I mean, yeah, most people wouldn't argue there's any distinguishing factor there. Like he left that baby to die, and that's what he's feeling.
There's no distinguishing factor that he sees,
right?
Because of his own guilt.
You know?
And if he could have done things better, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't happen. Like if he had listened to instructions better, if he had better control of his men.
Yeah, if he hadn't said that he saw the rifles in their hands, you know, or something. I mean, just any number.
Yeah, if he was just honestly like, I can't fucking see him.
Yeah, it's a fucked up situation. I mean, that's the biggest part of the film for me. I mean, I feel like that's where it's the most complex. I feel like that's where it's the most ruthless. I mean, I haven't seen another Vietnam film or any other war film that really shows the reality. A movie as willing to be as confrontational as Born on the 4th of July, even Platoon, which in dialogue addresses some of those things, but doesn't scene by scene really, you know. So
right. Yeah, it's a little more procedural in Platoon.
And it takes up so little of the film, but it doesn't leave your mind, you know, the reality.
And I think this is, again, aside from almost every scene in Magnolia, I think that scene is Tom Cruise's best work outside of Magnolia.
Yeah, I have to say Magnolia is the best.
His father puts him to bed and says, you should go to Mexico. It'll be good for you, blah, blah, blah. You know, clear your head, right, kind of thing. And then we basically cut forward.
Because the mother's all fed up. Yeah.
Yeah. Mother's not going to have him around, I don't think. And then we cut forward to Mexico in 1970. Ron is there with like in this like kind of tiki area with like tiki bar area with a bunch of other like vets that are in wheelchairs and stuff like that. And Willem Dafoe, that's his first appearance. He plays Charlie. Charlie is like kind of like a mirror as like of what Ron will be if he stays in Mexico too long.
Yeah.
Because Charlie,
I think they call that like a foil. He's a foil.
I think so.
Yeah.
And because Charlie's like alcoholic, like Charlie's like using prostitutes, he's drinking a lot, and like he's just kind of living in a haze. And you know, he basically introduces Ron Kovic to the prostitution in the area, and Kovic ends up having sex with a prostitute, and it's just really fucking sad because he can't feel below his chest really, so he's not feeling anything that's happening, and he just wishes he could, so he's just sobbing, and it's really heartbreaking. Like, and one of the next days too is he like wants to meet with that same prostitute again, but he remembers that she's a prostitute and has other clients, and he, you know, feels like it's something that he can't still find love. You know what I mean?
They even make a joke about it, like where she's like, "Are we gonna get married?" And he's like, "Yeah, you know." So I think he realizes the dynamic.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
logically realizes it, but subconsciously still would like to make an impression. You know what I mean? And then Charlie gets in a fight with one of the prostitutes because she laughs at him, and they get kicked out of the bar because they kind of make a scene, and they drive over to a different brothel, and then Charlie gets in a fight with the driver. He's like, I have like 3 notes in a row that are Charlie fights with prostitute, Charlie fights with driver, Charlie fights with Ron. Yeah, he's an asshole, and he's everything that Ron would become if Ron stayed there. That character is just like a good like template for kind of how things could go wrong for Ron.
Yeah.
One of my next favorite scenes in the movie is like when they have kind of like this shouting match, and he's like, "Did you never had to kill a baby? Like you weren't even there, man."
You don't know. You know, maybe I killed a fucking 100 babies. You know, fuck you.
And then they get into like just a fight where they're like spitting at each other and wrestling. And
yeah.
And then I think again, in one of Cruz's best scenes in the movie, he looks down at Charlie and he's like, "Do you remember when things made sense?"
And yeah, what am I gonna do? Yeah, and that's what you're feeling through the whole movie. Yeah.
And you know, and this is right after Charlie was just going off like fuck them all, fuck them all, fuck them all, like where they're both just so hopeless at this point. It's like when things made sense, when you know, when you had a god, when you had a country, when you had women and friends, and he has none of those things now. None of those things.
That's where the betrayal comes in, right? Like, I mean, so you feel like you're betrayed by your country because this little slice of Americana that you felt like you fucking belong to and you're fighting for, you know, is gone, you know, and they don't have any place for you, you know, you feel betrayed, you know, and like, you know, I think the culmination of that is with the dad. He loves his son. He loves his son. But he's like, I don't know what the fuck to do, Ronnie. You know, maybe going to Mexico is the best thing because he doesn't know what the fuck to do with him because he doesn't have room for that. He doesn't have a place for that in this world, you know. This resentment and this bitterness, you know.
So he goes back to America, and he goes back to Georgia, and this is when he goes to see Wilson's parents. Wilson's family has a long lineage of like fighting in every American war, like for sure all the way back to the Civil War.
Yeah.
And they have a bunch of like Confederate memorabilia and stuff like that going on.
Yeah, I was thinking of that scene where he's like confronting the family. I didn't even know what the fucking right thing was. I mean, they're like, you can stop, you know, and he's like, he doesn't know if he should or not. And he's come that far, and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Is it the selfish thing to confess for your own like ability to move on, but then you're cursing that family with knowing that
his son died for nothing. Basically, he's shot by a friendly.
Like,
yeah,
what a mind fuck that is, because you'd almost be like, okay, we can bring peace to the situation, but
where it's like, it's hard for me to say, but however hard it might be for you to fucking say, it's gonna be a hell of a lot harder for them to hear, you know, that you killed their son. And even though they've shown signs of being like, well, I don't know what the hell the whole war was for or whatever, I mean, yeah, there's a God in a wheelchair where you can't wheel your ass out of there.
yeah.
I mean, Jesus Christ. So, I mean, I guess it takes bravery. Yeah, I guess it does, right? Because you're fucked. Like, if they hate your guts and they want to kill you, there ain't a goddamn thing you can do about it, right? So I guess thinking about it, yeah, maybe that was the bravest thing to do, was to admit they're on the spot.
At the end of the day, I think it is the courageous thing to do to apologize and confess. Well, because he doesn't really apologize. Like, you can't really apologize for that almost. So like, all he could do is confess. Like, you're still not sure if it's the right thing to do though, because you could like the father said, we don't have to hear this, Ron.
Right, yeah.
Like we could live in like this blissful ignorance that that our son died, a little, not that it was his son's fault, but like died like a little more nobly, in a little bit more of a noble way than friendly fire. He could not live with himself though. He was in this spiral where he has nothing, and as soon as he apologizes, he kind of lifts a huge weight off of his shoulders. So yeah, it seems like it could be selfish, but it's
No,
also
but
courageous.
there's just no right way of going about that. I think that almost ties in with the war itself. There's no goddamn right, clear answer to any goddamn thing, and talking to these people, there's no right way to say I killed your fucking kid for nothing. Yeah, I don't know. It's a really morally fucked up scene.
And this is when he begins his activism, and he's like a big campaigner and activist for vets against the war, and chanting like, we don't want your fucking war, 1 2 3 4, we don't want your fucking war.
Yeah.
And he goes to protest the RNC, and at one point, and that's when he gets some TV publicity, and he's explaining how like these kids were lied to and manipulated and used, at like a whole generation was just used as like fodder to basically be like imperialistic America kind of thing, and that kind of rhetoric. And then outside the RNC, he's actually betrayed, and one of the people that were like wheeling him in, that were supposed to be activists with him, was actually an undercover like FBI agent or something. But there was a lot of that in those days. Yeah, must have been some kind of FBI agent. And then but he tries to arrest Ron, and they like kick him out of his wheelchair and stuff. But some of his against the war veterans like kind of save him from being arrested. And this is when this is like the closest thing to a climax that the movie gets at, or maybe is the closest thing to a climax that the movie gets that's like satisfying, where when like he's saved from being arrested outside the RNC, and they get the wheelchair back, and these are a bunch of vets, so they process things and can take orders like a soldier, right? So like a commander of his platoon, he orders, all right, we're going to take the hall back, you guys go this way, you guys go this way, like let's do this, let's do that, let's go. And the music really builds up. This is like my favorite part of the John Williams score. And it just feels triumphant, and they charge in on the hall, and it's kind of clouded with riot smoke and things like that, so we're not fully sure what goes on, but like he found his purpose, and that is his purpose, to fight this battle, and this battle is something that he can make sense of. And then the very last scene is they're pulling him to the like backstage at the DNC where he's about to speak, and he flashes back to his mother's dream of him saying great things in front of a lot of people, saying like great things in front of a lot of people like Kennedy. And then it goes into some titles where like he explains that Kovic didn't stop his activism and continued on, and became a like really important voice for wounded veterans, veterans against the war, etc. And and I again, like, okay, back in 1978, they tried to make Born on the 4th of July. Oliver Stone did. And
this is like 10 years later that this movie actually got made.
Yeah, and the really cool thing about the backstory of the making of this movie is that they were like a week away from it getting greenlit, and Oliver Stone, the dropped from under, and like it all like didn't get made. And then Oliver Stone made a promise to Ron Kovic where he was like, if I make it through and I'm like a good director and I can make the movies I want, I'll come back for you. And he did. Like right after he had his breakthrough with Platoon, this was pretty much the next thing he did. So that's just very admirable, cool story.
Yeah. I mean, that's like 10 years later. That's obviously he's a man of his word. 10 years,
Mm-hmm. And it's really important to both of them, and it's important to a lot of people. My recommendations, I would recommend y'all see Platoon.
Oh fuck yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Platoon, fucking goddamn one of the greatest movies ever made, regardless of a war film. Yep. Platoon. Top 20 for me.
And then my second recommendation would be JFK. It's got like a very good John Williams score, another like Robert Richardson shot film. It stars Kevin Costner, Tommy Lee Jones. It's got like Kevin Bacon and John Candy in it too, and Joe Pesci. Like it's got a hell of a cast. And I think JFK is his second best movie. Honestly, to me, Born on the 4th of July is like his third best, just for me.
But that JFK,
for me, it's Platoon, JFK, Born on the 4th of July. But for the year 1989, the only movie that I would probably put ahead of Born on the 4th of July is Do the Right Thing. So going with my consistency of top 2 movies of the year, I will give Born on the 4th of July 5 stars. How many stars out of 5 will you give it?
4.5.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely was thinking 4.5. Just to differentiate it a little bit from JFK and Platoon, but yeah, worth mentioning. Oliver Stone also wrote Midnight Express and Scarface, so we would recommend you go see those. Have a good 4th of July, Independence Day. Follow us on Spotify, subscribe, hit the like button, tell your friends, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram. Either way, have a good 4th of July. Fuck them all.
Yeah, fuck them all.